Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Everyone, find a seat, get comfy. We have a few more coming in the door. We have plenty of seats back here. Just fill right in. Happy to have everybody. Look at this turnout. Yay. Woo! Welcome, guys. My name is Angela Kinney, and I am the chair of our Volunteer Engagement Committee on the Leadership Council. So my favorite thing to talk about. And we're thrilled to have you all here today. Thank you for just being present and being willing to share and talk things out. We are calling this Real Talk, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if you got any ugly, just bring it. No, we're not expecting a whole lot of ugly. But the point is we want everybody to be frank and open. And what we want to talk about today is recruiting those core volunteers that have high impact, retaining them, planning for succession. It's going to be real casual. What we're going to do is spend about 15 minutes listening to some of our national leaders have this discussion about how they handle some of these situations in their own chapters. And then afterwards, you can have your own similar conversations at your tables. And we'll pick one person to be the facilitator at every table and kind of do a report out at the end, make some notes about best practices, and walk out of here in an hour a lot smarter. So we've already sort of picked. Most tables do have a facilitator picked out. Could our facilitators just kind of stand out? A lot of them are in our committee, our volunteer leadership committee. If you do not have a standing person at your table, this is where you pick someone. So make sure you have one person in mind. Everybody's good? Okay, so with that again, volunteer engagement is the whole reason we're here, right? This is all about what the Volunteer Leadership Conference is about. And I think, my core message is always the same, and some of you have heard me say this before, but I think volunteer engagement starts with our own ability to get in the right mindset about it. We have to remember that there's a lot of talk about how hard it is to ask people for money or how hard it is to ask people to get involved or do things. But my mom always said, it's just a tweak in your perspective about anything to solve any problem. And I believe that wholeheartedly because really it's such a gift to be able to do what we do and to be part of this engine that's changing the world. And my point is to ask other people to do that, to give them the opportunity to change the world with us is a privilege, and it's a gift you're giving them too. And that's where it all starts. And there are a handful of people we've selected in this room that have really owned that attitude and are here to share with us a little bit about how that translates in their own chapters. So we have a wonderful handful of panelists that are going to come up for our first 15 minutes. Why don't we have you guys come up right now? And as you're walking up, I'll tell everybody a little bit about you. Okay, so Matt. Welcome, Matt. Matt, raise your hand. Matt is from our Northern California chapter. He is from the tech business in the Silicon Valley. He's got 2 daughters with cystic fibrosis. He's been involved on his board since 2011, 4 years of it as board president. So we're happy to have you here. And Jenny, we have Jenny from the Cincinnati chapter. Here, she's been involved for many years. Her daughter Julia has cystic fibrosis. She's got a Julia and a James. Julia's the one with CF. Her and her husband Joe, I'm getting the feeling there's a lot of J's, have this awesome pledge to raise $1 million personally before their daughter turns 18, which I think is pretty cool. And she is the board chair of her Cincinnati chapter, involved in a lot of events there as well. Bonnie Banker, my sister. She's my sister in our sorority. So she is from South Florida. chapter, and her granddaughter has CF, Delaney. A lot of people know Bonnie. She's the former VLC chair. She has co-chaired so many events in her local chapter, and right now she is really launching our National Grampian Initiative, which is for our champions who are grandparents. Yay! Layla White from the Georgia chapter. She is the Tomorrow Leader chair, and she's been involved ever since her best friend's son was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. So she's involved across the boards, great strides, finest. And the coolest things I think she's doing right now is that she's leading the Tomorrow's Leaders team in the Grand Canyon extreme hike.
We still have spots.
Yeah. Which is the coolest thing ever. I did it a few years ago. It's like 25 miles, 10,000 feet of elevation. I'll never do it again. But it was absolutely incredible. So the fact that she's putting this team together is pretty amazing. And Dan's right there in red. He is from the Southern California Orange County chapter. He's the Tomorrow's Leaders chair there as well. His wife, Bryce, has CF. And he participated in Orange County's inaugural Finest event just a couple years ago, right? So that's really exciting. He took on this chair position, and he has now helped to recruit one of the largest Tomorrow's Leaders program in the country. So, and what about his socks, Bonnie?
Really nice socks.
Really cool socks. Yeah. So welcome, everyone. I thank you for taking this time to just kind of share. And what we'd really encourage you to do is just to sit and have a conversation as if you're sitting at the bar right now. Okay? So picture the margaritas. And you're just having a discussion like we do so often. And I think we're going to kickstart things off with you, Matt. I know that you have been very instrumental in recruiting new board members in your chapter, and you've really had some success with that, including sort of developing a succession plan.
Right.
So I'd love for you to kind of start the conversation out and tell us a little bit about what you think we should know.
Sure. Great to see everyone. Great to be here with you. A few notes. So I joined the board in 2011, I guess it was, and we had about 6 members, and everybody was making diving catches and engaging, and there's a lot of effort, but also a lot of burnout and burden. It was a small group of board members and a chapter that was really trying to grow. So there were sort of 2 topics I wanted to touch on. One was just growing the board. The other was succession planning. Maybe do those in reverse order. About 2 years ago, I guess I approached our executive director. I'd been board chair for 4 years and said, best practice really is to roll off. And so there wasn't any real guideline to go do that. So Brandy Zahner and I, our executive director, talked about it, discussed with other board members who might be a suitable successor, and then went out and made that transition for the chapter. And I think that's now, getting more embedded in sort of best practice nationally, not after our example, but that's what we went through. But it was an effective transition, and I stayed on the board and stay, of course, committed to the cause. There were really 2 phases, briefly, in building out our board. When we had 6 people, it was really hard to get to 12. That was a lot of the heavy lifting, and so we did all the things you'd expect, which was we would ask board members for recommendations of friends. We would contact, looking for board members, for added members, people who were leaders in major events, whether Great Strides or the Extreme Hike, which was my event. And so we had some traction doing that. We also realized we wanted to have a board that looked a lot more like the community. So we were thinking about who are the major employers in the area, people that are either engaged in the community or would take interest in our cause. And so we got to 12. We were also pretty flexible at that point because we were trying to get something built, a foundation, looking for folks who could both contribute, who had capacity, which is often code for the ability to donate in the nonprofit world, but also who had capacity in terms of drive, energy, commitment, leadership. And a great board has both of those things. The second phase of growing from like 12, we got to 20 members now, so we've got a really large-scale, robust board. That was a lot easier because we'd kind of gotten our story together. We had a good group. I also started asking new members to nominate new members, to bring a friend. And so we had a larger posse of people looking to grow the board. Be happy to chat with any of you about what our experience was. A few takeaways, and I promise I'll pass the mic. Things that we've learned along the way as a group. One is never stop recruiting, even if you're at sort of your board capacity, partly because people roll off, people move or get tired, and donor networks get tired. So you're always recruiting, whether for growth or to backfill. Think about capacity both in terms of dollars and energy. You need both of those things on a board, as I noted. That was really important to us. Something we talked briefly about when we first sat down here. It's also great to have people join the board who don't have a direct CF connection. Bless people that will do that, but someone pointed out to me when I first joined our board that there are so many more people out there that don't have a connection. So there's a much broader community of people that you can touch and engage. If you have folks like that on your board, we're lucky to have several of those on the NorCal chapter board. We also try hard now, especially with a board of 20, to kind of customize more what the board engagement is for each person on the board, what event. And we talk about that annually, so you can have a real specific discussion and plan and do it in an organized way. When you get to scale, that gets easier to do, so that's a good thing. But what I'd recommend is sort of think about, if you're growing your board, think about the board you want rather than just being opportunistic with meeting people through chance or people that are sent to you. Think about what would allow you to better connect to your community. Are you connecting with the major employers, with the care centers? A couple things we found really useful on our side. We have, that's my little timer, which says I should shut up in a minute.
I love it.
We have a couple of people on the board who are really good at talking about the scientific topics. That's great for public speaking, so they're comfortable doing that. So we have a lot of people that can step up at a public event and explain the science and research behind CF. So I think those are all important parts of recruiting and building out the board. Two thoughts in parting. One is we try really hard to have at least annually a spouse or significant other dinner for all board members to get together, and that's a great plus for us. The other thing is what I've always felt, and it's really true, is always look for a chance to say thank you. Everybody's volunteering their time. No one's getting paid to do this, and although the community is vibrant and great to be part of, never miss an opportunity to highlight contributions from your staff and the chapter or members of the board. But our experience was we grew from 6 to 20 over about 4 or 5 years. It was harder at first and a little easier as we went along.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Matt. Let's raise our margaritas to Matt. Well done. For you guys that just came in, we're pretending we're at a bar. Does anybody else at the bar have anything to discuss or add to that?
So similar to Matt's story, but quite different. We didn't really have a strong board that we were starting with. I believe it was like 2 years ago, the national office released a new board structure. And building to that structure for us in Cincinnati has been pretty challenging. We had a great group of parents and volunteers that were good at executing more committee-type roles, but we didn't really have the corporate outreach. We didn't have a Tomorrow's Leaders. We didn't have a pipeline. So it took us quite a bit of time of grouping, of getting the right people that we wanted. And this time last year, we had 2 people on our board, myself and our Tomorrow's Leaders chair. Now a year later, we're up to 6. Cincinnati is a smaller chapter compared to some of the California and Chicago chapters, but the people we have are working towards the goals that the national office has set up in the strategy. We spent a lot of time looking for people who were the right fit and doing without in between versus getting people on board that maybe didn't quite get the path that we were going down. And that's really hard because you're leaning hard on the foundation staff to cover those empty areas in between. So our story is a little bit different. We have been still in build mode, but we're getting there and getting, like I said, the right people involved. And then also holding them accountable. I think that's something we don't really talk about with volunteers. It's really hard to have somebody give you their time. We're not paid board positions. We're not corporate boards. But we are changing the direction of our company. And when they understand that, and realize that they too are getting something out of it beyond a thank you. That's really important to us as we build the boards.
So, like every CF story is unique, so is every board story. In South Florida, we, for the past 8 years, had 2 boards. If you know anything about South Florida, it is busy, it is hectic. There's this little magic line that separates 2 of our major counties, Dade and Broward. And you don't cross that little magic line, especially on a weekday. So that's why we had 2 boards. But as you've heard, we are stronger together. So the decision was made that we were going to form 1 board. So now we had 30 people in our Broward board, 30 people in our Dade board. 60 people was not going to work out. So we, like you all, adopted the new preferred board structure where we have the different committees and everybody sits on a committee and they are accountable on that committee. So when we put that out to our board members, many of them respectfully backed off the board. So the board is now 1 board. We had our first meeting. It is not pretty. I'm not going to tell you that this is easy, because if it happens to you, I don't want you to say, oh, it'll be easy. South Florida did it. It's not easy. And there are feelings that have been hurt, and we're trying to, fix those wounds. We're trying to work on what's next, because I know I'm not going to sit as the chair forever. My clock started ticking again with the time on the board once we structured our new board. But all that now is going in place. So one of the things that our board is actively doing is starting to recruit Grampians, not only for our board, but for our entire volunteer programs. So I want to just take a brief amount of time to really tell you all what the Grampian program is. You don't have to do anything more than you're already doing. It's how to take this amazing group and put them to work. Many grandparents, I get messages all the time. And these messages, through Facebook, or I get emails. I have a grandchild with cystic fibrosis, but they live 1,000 miles away from me. So I wish there was a place for me. And I wish I could be in front of them shaking them. My answer back is, there is a place for you. Tell me where you live. I Google their address versus the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. I find the executive director. I call the executive director. I said, I have a great volunteer for you. Please call them. Boom, we made a love connection. This program is hopefully going to show people that this is in place for you. Aren't ready to get involved. And I feel so bad that I'm doing nothing. And I write back, when did you ever ask your children for permission? Just do it. If they're not ready, it doesn't mean you're not ready. And again, we find the directors. This program is also going to open up the staff to realizing that go out and find these grandparents. If we all, as a staff, went to, or as a chapter, found out where do your parents live? Where do your parents live? Where do your parents live? And we told those different offices where these grandparents are. The staffs can reach out to them. And these grandparents are the perfect ones to learn the 5-minute elevator speech. These are the perfect ones to be at the mission table at Great Strides. The perfect ones to be at a gala greeting everybody and answering questions. And really for advocacy, like in your state, in your neighborhoods, a legislator will listen to a constituent who is of this population, because grandparents are more likely to vote than any other block of constituent. So they're going to take the time. So work with your EDs on this program. The staff, Molly is here to answer questions. Call us. You can get a hold of me. But we want, to help you help the grandparents. So thank you.
So I see Mark Ginsky is walked in the back of the room, so everybody put your margaritas under the table. And Layla.
I
It's me? Okay. I missed the call. I didn't, the prep call. So listening to you guys talk, it's a lot about this pipeline and, the succession planning and, is it a pipeline into Grampians, as well. And that's really what Tomorrow's Leaders, that's one of the main things of what Tomorrow's Leaders is about. Before I get into that though, just always remember if you're asking for money, you're asking for time, you're asking someone to be on a board, to participate in Tomorrow's Leaders, the worst thing that anyone can do is say no. They say no, you move on to the next. So just always keep that number one in the back of your mind. So Tomorrow's Leaders started a year ago. It kind of kicked off at VLC last year. And I kicked off chairing the Georgia chapter. So we already had a really strong CF's Finest. We call it Peachtree Society in Georgia because it's the peach state. And so we've always had a really good program through that for about the past 6 years or so. So it was really easy for us to kind of kick off Tomorrow's Leaders. The council, the recruit for the council, we of course went to all of our finest and asked them, would you like to be on the council? And then even just to be able to recruit members, we went to that same group. So it's been, we've been chugging along. We have 60 plus, Natalie? Yeah, about 60 plus members, which is awesome. But now we're in our second year and we need to continue growing. And we also need to think about that succession planning for when I move off of being the chair. So it's been really fun, just kind of watching this thing grow and, like I said, pulling from these different areas. But now we want to expand beyond the direct connections or the little bit indirect. So we're really focused on recruiting the folks that are already involved and asking them to always bring somebody to an event, whether it's networking, a professional development, an open house, that type of thing. We always want to think about moving out of our inner circle because that's what we really need to keep more and more people involved and get that, the advocacy and that story out there consistently. So that's.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as Pam mentioned earlier, and I'm also going to talk more about the Tomorrow's Leaders aspect, similar to Layla, but we did ours a little bit differently. We didn't do the council until just recently. We kind of started the second year. We wanted to have a base of members to go pull from almost and kind of say, hey, here's our pool of candidates. Let's figure out what each person is best at and kind of draw it that way. So, every chapter is going to do it a little bit differently. But one thing that Pam said this morning was you have to get people to buy in. And one of the best ways to do that is to make it personal. So I would say in every chapter, there's going to be maybe one or two people who they're on fire. And it may be the chair. And if you are the chair for Tomorrow's Leaders of your chapter, it doesn't have to be you. It may be. But don't feel, and this is something that I've been working on, don't feel that you have to do it all on your own. You've got this great team. You have these connections. Use them. If you start with your council, if you build your council later, use them. And as Layla said, one of the big things we've done, and we're, I think, right at 60 people as well. And we started, with no one. We actually did our first finest 2 years ago. So we have our third one. So kind of all of this is brand new for us with building these, young professional programs and bringing people in. But every chapter is going to have those one or two people who are really on fire and they're just gung-ho about everything. Use them. Use them to make introductions. When you are having a networking event, a mixer for Tomorrow's Leaders, and somebody comes who doesn't have that direct connection, make sure that you connect them with somebody who has a direct connection so they feel that personal relationship. It's emotional. Use that in the best way that you can. I wrote other notes down because I'm really bad at remembering things. So you never know who's going to be involved in that. That one person that you could ask, you don't know who they know who might be involved. One example is I invited my chiropractor. I've been going to him. I met him through a chamber event a couple years ago. I invited him, and since he's joined, he's brought, I believe, one other person who's now a member as well. And my chiropractor is now doing Finest this year. So it's kind of really exciting to see how they get involved in one aspect and go to the other, or vice versa, where we've reached out to our Finest pools. And actually, we're doing a joint mixer in April with our Tomorrow's Leaders and our Finest to kind of commingle and then plant the seed of, hey, you could do Finest next year, or you could now join to become a Tomorrow's Leader. So use your existing events and ways to catapult them into that next phase of being involved. Another gal that I met, she just reached out to me on LinkedIn. We grabbed coffee. She has joined. She's brought 2 or maybe 3 people into Tomorrow's Leaders as well. She's done extreme hike. She's done a lot of other things. So you never know, how involved that one person's going to get, even if they don't have any connection. And I would say maybe our split is 70-30 of people who have a connection to people who don't have a connection. And it's so amazing to see the people who don't have a direct connection. They're a coworker, they're a neighbor, they stumble upon your event, whatever it may be, to see them really get involved. The last thing I want to kind of say is always show value, especially with Tomorrow's Leaders. And as Andrew's saying, we're up in Orange County, so there's this idea of FOMO, fear of missing out. FOMO is real, people. People, and this could just be a regional thing. Maybe in other chapters it's not as big of a deal, but we use that a lot. We do a good mixture of events that are open to anyone because we want to recruit even more. Starting this year, we were right around 50. So my goal is to grow this year to 100 people, to double our Tomorrow's Leaders group. So the way we do that is every event we tell people bring 1 or 2 guests, whether it's an open event, whether it's a specific Tomorrow's Leaders. Anywhere that we're going to go, we try to have people bring 1 or 2 connections that are within that range for Tomorrow's Leaders. Just to always get them involved, always be making that ask. You're always talking to people about it. And then talk to your staff. There's a lot of great resources that they can have as well from the national office, from national Tomorrow's Leaders. If you have an idea, they are amazing resources. So use all the resources available. And I'm just so honored to be a part of this.
Can I add 2 other things?
Say it.
Okay.
We have time.
Yeah. So one of
perfectly
the other
on
things
time.
too, like with recruiting for especially a Tomorrow's Leaders, look at your board and look at your board and the board's connections. What companies are involved? Go make that ask of, hey, we know you have a strong group of folks within the demographic age that we're looking for. Has anyone showed an interest in philanthropic efforts? Make that ask, just within that sphere of influence that we have that are sitting there at our disposal. Look at national family teams with great strides. So I know personally in Georgia, we have a very strong team for Grayton's Guardians, but Grayton has a lot of friends throughout the country. So we created a national family team 3 years ago, and now those folks, they still want to be involved with the CF community to support Grayton, who's sitting in Georgia. So this is also an opportunity to reach out. Who's leading those teams that is maybe part of a national family team that's kind of headquartered elsewhere? Those are your lowest hanging fruit when you're looking at trying to build up that group.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And you can see just listening in on this conversation that we're not just talking about successes and not just low-hanging fruit, but the hardships and the struggles. And that's kind of what we want to do, is encourage that kind of discussion today, continue to talk about that. We're all family here, so this is where we should have those, even the tough conversations. But the underlying factor is that everyone up here is not afraid to own the fact that they are offering people something wonderful, that it's a gift and a privilege to be able to reach out and ask others to change the world. And that's where it all starts. And that's what we need to not ever lose focus on, ever. And that's our job as a volunteer leader for this organization. So what we'd like to do now is kind of have you guys pick up on this conversation and chat with each other at your tables and, bring up those challenges. Talk about your successes. We're going to take about 15 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back, and any table that would like to share will be able to do so. There's actually a piece of paper on your table that you can actually take some notes for yourself to share and also to take home. For those of you at home, we'd love for you to take the next 10 minutes or so to really think through this exercise as well and send in your comments and your suggestions and your questions, and we'd be happy to share those with the group as well. And thank you to our panel. Okay, everyone. Nothing like interrupting dozens of people all at the same time. But we're going to have to call the conversation quits and get started with a little group sharing. So, okay, everyone. And don't worry, you'll have time to continue these conversations. We do have a break afterwards, so you can always stick around and keep talking. So I'd like to ask for any of our facilitators that are just dying to share something that they've learned at their table. We have one right here, Bonnie Binker.
One or two? Oh my gosh, we had so many good ideas, so I'm going to talk fast. We have a table of tomorrow's leaders, and they were saying the way that they are recruiting people, that by telling people that, you can, if you're looking for an organization, you can be a very little fish in a really big pond, because some of other organizations that try to get them are massive sized, or you can be a really big fish in a smaller pond. And we looked around the room at how many Tomorrow leaders were invited to this conference, and do you think that some of the other medical organizations or other philanthropic organizations would have invited so many of this group to their national leadership conference? Think not. And one of the really great things that they also brought out, well, I'm going to do two real quick. They did a professional development event bringing tomorrow's leaders and the board together for a mixer. So they didn't have to go outside their own board to find people to professionally develop the tomorrow's leaders. I think that's awesome. And just a real quick another one. They volunteer at the galas. Therefore, they're getting face-to-face hellos with people they would have never met in New York City. So, good job, guys.
Awesome. Okay, let's hear from another table. Who has some things they'd like to share? Okay. Here we go. We'll keep those hands up when it's time.
Okay, our focus was a little bit different. We kind of focused on more of like the young adults that are kind of transitioning from the children to the adults, sometimes not wanting to tell people that they have CF or whatever the case may be. So one good idea would be to start early. So when the children are young, get their friends, parents involved, get the schools involved, and kind of keep that momentum going through the years. And then as they transition from, teenager to young adult, then they can possibly take that ownership over themselves. So when they're in college, they can, start doing their own fundraising, getting their college friends, to be part of it, and kind of that transition. And then we also talked about, as young children age, the focus might shift. So maybe for several years they're involved with Great Strides, but then having something else for them to transition to that might be better for their age. So like Tomorrow's Leaders or Finest or something like that. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Eileen, we have someone in the back.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm from the Northern New England chapter. A couple of things we came up with. In New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine, we're a lot of college rural towns. So a lot of the problems with our Tomorrow's Leaders is people have to travel. But if you want to hit some of the young leaders and you want to hit the college students, if you want to hit the good college students to start them young, you want the freshmen and sophomores. Well, they're only 18 and 19. So it makes it hard to really hit the college communities, because if it's 21 and up, you're only getting the seniors, which they're already kind of moving on, so you can't really get them committed. So we're kind of hoping and helping, looking for answers for that.
Stay tuned for the college program.
Yes.
It's
So
Coming.
maybe we'll take the lead and become the pilot to hit colleges and get colleges
Oh, do you hear
started
that?
at
Write that
18
down,
and under.
Molly.
Julia, where are you? What's your name again?
My name's Sharon. My friend Josh lives in the UNH area. I'm in the Dartmouth College area. So
We will find you.
if there's
We
any
are-
other college town people, we would love to try and.
We're on it. It's the next stage of tomorrow's leaders.
You think my mic's broke? The other thing that people were thinking about was asking the younger people, what do they want? What can they bring to help us engage other younger people, because they would know more than what some of us would as to what makes them, what would make a get together more exciting.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, looking for more hands. Have we got one in the middle? Katrina?
Hi, I'm Katrina from San Diego, and we came up with, I thought, 2 really good tips for everyone. One is that ideally all our boards should have a mix of CF families and non-CF families, and for those non-CF families to make it really personal and to link them with an ambassador so that they have someone that they're champion. They can walk around with a picture. This is, Susie. This is who I'm fighting for a cure for, and it makes it really personal. And obviously they're fighting for everyone, but it gives them that one special person. And then for every single board member, we should be practicing our elevator speeches, which is what we talked about this time last year.
Yes.
And every board member, because you walk around with a CF T-shirt, you have a CF license plate on your car, or you get stopped at the market wearing a Great Strides hat, that you can quickly say, why I fight for CF and who I'm fighting for, and hopefully get them to do the same.
Awesome. Thank you, Katrina.
Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm from Bakersfield, California. We're part of the LA chapter. And so the conversation around the table was trying to help us figure out, in a fairly large community, 400,000 plus in Bakersfield, we're disconnected from LA. And so I was part of the finest group and just really struggled with getting any corporate sponsorships or any type of help from the community, because it was an LA thing, not a Bakersfield thing. So anyone in the room, if you have, you're kind of on the outskirts of a chapter, how do you manage that? Do you have a separate council? Because the board's not there, obviously, but what do you do to help build external community groups to raise money in your area? So that's the question.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody actually have a response, and then they want to chime in with that?
New Hampshire has 1 million people total. So 1,000 is like such a first world problem. But
Hey, just like I said, perspective. Yes, Eileen has someone back there.
I'm Amy from Central New York, and we actually focused on the engagement piece. And the idea came up of having a mission moment at all meetings. So whether it's a board meeting, a committee meeting, tomorrow's leaders meeting, to either have someone with CF come in and speak, to give a research update, just to kind of focus on the why and the impact that people are making. And then also talking about, when we bring in new committee members or board members, really having that one-on-one, face-to-face meeting to find out what fuels them, where their passion is. So instead of us just saying we need a board member, that might not be their thing. So really just focusing more on the needs of people just to keep them excited.
Got one right in the middle.
We talked about engaging new volunteers outside of fundraising opportunities, and we talked about really the expansion of the CF Cares program and what that's done for chapters. In particular, our chapter in South Carolina, we've had a lot of events in the past year and have been able to start to engage families that were not engaged with us at all, and not necessarily in a fundraising way, but in advocacy and through community voice and other programs. And we also talked about engaging the care center staff in different ways. Atlanta has a great idea in talking to their patients. We have their docs wear just big buttons that say "I stride for my patients," so it opens a dialogue conversation rather than handing them that Great Strides T-shirt or starting that conversation. It allows the patient to open that dialogue.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more if anybody has something they really want to share with our group. Well, that makes me feel good. We covered everybody. Okay, this is wonderful. And I want to remind everyone that when you did check in, you received an email list, a contact list of every single person who's registered for this conference. So it's like you have in your pocket a business card for every single person, including the people you just talk with at your table. So keep this conversation going. Let's maybe take a few minutes just to jot down anything you want to remember to take home with you. I can share with you my little recap of what I picked up today as some of our best practices. We've learned overall that this isn't always an easy process, but the point is that it is a process and it can take time, and eventually it can be transformative for your chapters and for your goals. We learn not to rush, to really take time to find the right people who have the right interests and the right passions for the right positions. We talked a lot about cross-colonization and drawing from one initiative to find the perfect volunteers for another. We talked about selling impact as one of our selling points for those that we're recruiting. The big fish in the small pond is a big deal. Considering the transition process as a potential feeder opportunity was something really interesting we talked about. Soliciting feedback directly from our target groups, especially when we're talking about young professionals. Where are their passions? What would they like to be doing? To link key volunteers with ambassadors, to continue to promote and prepare our elevator speeches is crucial. To really think about the challenges, like living in the outskirts of a chapter, and what is your workaround? How are you going to make sure that your pipeline is being filled effectively? Never miss an opportunity for a mission moment, and make time for those one-on-ones with key people in your chapters and your key volunteers. So thank you so much. We're actually very excited that this room is as full as it is. We went and peeked, and we're the biggest. Yeah. And I think it's just because it's very clear and obvious that, we can't be those scientists in there filling our drug pipeline directly, but we know we can fill the people pipeline that keeps this all moving. So thank you all for being here and for being so candid and sharing. And we're going right into a half-hour break. So continue to enjoy the conference, and we'll see you all later at the Real Bar.